I'm actually quite astounded by the number of people who have been expressing their discontent with these leaks. The recent information surrounding the Ryzen 7 9800X3D is something that I already saw coming from a mile away. And I mean, you would too if you had just taken a look at Zen 5's gaming performance. It's going to be interesting to see how AMD positions this new chip, but if you were potentially interested in this upcoming processor, honestly my advice would be to find a discounted 7800X3D. Let's discuss that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. It turns out that MSI has accidentally leaked information surrounding AMD's upcoming gaming CPU, the 9800X3D, a CPU that is anticipated by a lot of gamers and hardware enthusiasts. Usually when it comes to information like this, I'm suggesting you guys take it with a grain of salt, and that still applies here, but these leaks are coming from a partner of AMD who make their AM5 motherboards, so the numbers are fairly legit. Though the information here is quite limited and it doesn't give us nearly as much of an overview on the CPU's capabilities as much as a review done from an independent third-party reviewer would. With that said, I'm not really surprised with what's been shown here, and in fact I said this in a previous video of mine where we discussed initial Zen 5 results that due to the architecture's underwhelming gaming performance, I'm not expecting great things from the 9000X3D CPUs. One of the other things I wanted to come back to was how I'm not really feeling optimistic about the 9800X3D. Since Zen 5's gaming performance is basically Zen 4 give or take, then adding 3D V-Cache is just going to create another 7800X3D, aka the 9800X3D. I could be wrong though, unless something about the new cache is different or its effects on Zen 5's architecture are more profound. I just don't really see the reason to get hyped for a 9800X3D. When considering these results, it's not going to be a whole deal faster than a 7800X3D. In that video, I made it pretty clear that since Zen 5 wasn't impressing us in the gaming department, then we couldn't expect the 9800X3D to magically solve that. You see, AMD's X3D processors have traditionally given us a nice bump in gaming performance, but they're not like a magical cure. They're using the same architecture with an extra layer of 3D V-Cache slapped on a CCD to boost certain workloads. And while that works for specific types of games, especially those that rely heavily on cache, it's not going to make a 20 to 30% leap across the board. If we look at a recent review from Tech PowerUp of the Ryzen 7 9700X, AMD's recent 8-core Zen 5 part, you can see the 7800X3D based on Zen 4 is about 8% faster, and it's also 10% faster than a 7700X. In that same review, conveniently for us, we can also see that they've included the 5800X3D based on Zen 3, and the 7800X3D is about 12% faster. When it comes to CPU performance differences, in order to entice consumers to upgrade, the gains need to be large, at least like 20 to 30%. Let me also remind you guys that when we talk about CPU performance and look at reviews or tests, they're done in an environment where CPU-bound conditions are enforced. And the most easiest way to achieve that is by using the fastest GPU in the market, so in this case an RTX 4090, and test at a resolution like 1080p. But let's be real here, the amount of people who actually game like that will be very small. And so under more realistic conditions, where a 4090 owner is gaming at 4K or 1440p, those CPU differences are further diminished, or someone who's actually gaming at 1080p is using a much slower GPU, like a 4060 Ti or 6700 XT. So do keep that in mind, and this does make the whole discussion somewhat comical. But let's break down the leaks themselves so we can understand exactly what we're dealing with here. According to MSI, the Ryzen 9800X3D offers a gaming performance improvement anywhere between 2 to 13% over the previous generation 7800X3D. So there were only 3 games shown: Black Myth Wukong, which is a pretty GPU-bound game, so a small difference between CPUs isn't surprising here. Shadow of the Tomb Raider from my testing has shown to scale decently with CPUs, and we only see a 4% difference between the 9950X3D and the vanilla 9950X. Then in Far Cry 6, which is a very CPU-bound game, we see a difference of about 11 or 13% depending on if you look at the 16-core comparison or the 8-core models respectively. Again, not a huge sample size of games to really make any sort of conclusive statement yet. However, based on what we know about the current generation products and where they stand, it's really not that hard to guess where the Zen 5 3D parts like the 9800X3D and 9950X3D will land. I'll reiterate what I said in my previous video, since Zen 5 is basically Zen 4 in gaming, and AMD AMD isn't going to be doing anything special with Zen 5 3D, like rework the cache, increase clocks in a meaningful way, or find a way to further reduce fabric latency, then essentially what we're going to be getting here is very similar gaming performance to the 7800X3D. This relatively minor bump in performance has left a lot of people feeling underwhelmed, and frankly, I don't blame them. For those of you who already own a 7800X3D, the prospect of upgrading to a 9800X3D for a 2% to 13% gain is, well, it's hardly compelling. And typically, I'm not recommending people to upgrade to the next CPU generation, but rather wait a couple of generations. I know many 5800X3D owners who were probably feeling the upgrade itch had their eyes set on the 9800X3D, that this CPU will probably entice them to finally upgrade to the AM5 platform so that way they can take advantage of things like DDR5 and PCI Express 5.0, but given what we just saw, I can see many skipping this generation too, which is great because 1, you might as well save the money and put it towards something else, and 2, these are CPU bound situations where the difference in performance is already pretty minimal, and in a GPU bound situation, the difference or performance gap will be even smaller. Now, I know there are going to be some of you out there thinking, but Danny, AMD's 3D V-Cache is still revolutionary, and sure, I'll give credit where credit is due. The 3D V-Cache technology does provide a noticeable advantage in some specific games, especially those games which are CPU bound or rely heavily on the cache. We saw that with the 5800X3D, and it carried over to the 7800X3D as well. Just look at a game like Baldur's Gate 3 or Factorio. But when we are talking about this generation, it's clear that AMD isn't giving us the same kind of performance jump that we've come to expect from them in the past. I looked at the Reddit thread where this leak was discussed, and man, people aren't holding back. There's a sense of disappointment that's echoed throughout that thread, with many users expressing frustration over the lackluster performance gains. One comment that stood out to me simply said, "I'm going to be sticking with my 7800X3D, thanks." There were plenty of 5800X3D owners who also said the same and said, you know what, I'm just going to be sticking with this platform and I'll wait for AM6 at this stage. And that pretty much sums up the general mood. If you dig a little deeper, the comments also point to something we've been seeing a lot in recent years, which is this trend of incremental upgrades. It feels like every new product generation, whether it's from AMD, Intel, or even Nvidia, is giving us smaller and smaller gains. And this isn't just necessarily a criticism of just AMD. Intel's been guilty of this too. We're no longer seeing the kinds of revolutionary jumps in performance that we saw in, say, the 2000s or early 2010s. Instead, it's more of a slow, steady progression, which, let's be honest, can feel a bit boring. That's not to say there's no value in these smaller improvements, but I think the problem lies in the way these products are marketed. AMD and their partners are still hyping up these new releases like they're the next big thing. But when the actual performance data leaks, it's clear that there were only marginal gains. And this creates a disconnect between expectations and reality. For Ryzen 9000X3D, if AMD wants these processors to sell, they're going to have to price them competitively. And as it stands, people not just one generation ago, but 2 or 3 are saying they don't even want to bother with this. And this is going to create a serious problem for them in terms of sales. But I think AMD knows that, hence we start to see the disappearance of these popular last-gen SKUs from major retailers like Newegg or Amazon. Newegg is completely sold out of 7800X3Ds, and the only ones available are from third-party sellers at egregious prices. Even Amazon is sold out as well, and when they were in stock, the price has gone up considerably. At one point, the 7800X3D was retailing for like $320, which was a pretty decent deal, but now at around $480, it's a hard pill to swallow. And maybe in order to maintain a high price, they're doing this deliberately. Once the 9800X3D is announced, they can do so at a higher price because they know those prospective buyers have no other choice. But there are still other alternatives. Right now, you can buy a 13900KF for like less than $390, and if you know how to tune this thing properly, you not only have an amazing gaming CPU, but also a workstation monster. Either way, I just think we're going to see a lot of hesitation from potential buyers, especially given the relatively minor performance gains. And that really isn't good considering current generation Zen 5 sales have been pretty lackluster. I do recall seeing a headline or article from one of the tech press outlets, I think it was PC Gamer or PC World, stating that this is basically AMD's new bulldozer. And remember, I did say this in one of my original thumbnails for when we were talking about Zen 5 earlier. But let's circle back to the core issue here, which is the gaming performance. As much as I'd love to see AMD blow us away with a 30 to 40% improvement, the reality is that we're just not there anymore. CPU performance has plateaued in recent years, and while incremental improvements are still happening, the days of massive leaps in performance with each new generation seems to be behind us now, at least for now until they have a breakthrough in, new silicon technology, or if they're going to be using graphite, who knows. At the end of the day, it just comes down to what you value in a gaming processor. If you're someone who absolutely needs the latest and greatest, then sure, go for the 9800X3D. But for the average gamer, I just don't see the appeal, especially when you can get a very similar performance from the 7800X3D for what will be a lower price. That is, if you can still find one. Or there are other alternatives, like look at the 12700KF on a clearance deal, or look at something like a 13900KF, or get something like the 5700X3D if you're on AM4. There's still plenty of other options at good cost-effective price points. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents on the matter. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about all of this and all the leaks, whether you're still excited for the 9800X3D, do you think the incremental performance gains are still worth it, or are you holding out for something that's more substantial? Let me know in the comments down below. As for now, that's going to be wrapping it up for this one, and we'll touch base in the next video. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.